Hi, I'm Dr. Bertice Berry, and I want to tell you a story. Growing up, my family was financially very poor. We lived in a house on a street that wasn't really a street, it was an alley. There were rows of lime green garages and a motorcycle gang, I should say club. The Thunder Guards would hum their bikes down our street at any hour of the day, and it became a sound that we just got accustomed to. Our house on the inside was extremely clean because my mother said, even though we're poor, we don't have to be dirty. We'll never be dirty. We're going to be clean. So you could walk in and you could smell polished wood, and you could smell clean windows, and you could smell furniture that had been fluffed and beaten and fluffed up, and everything smelled nice. There were lilacs and roses that grew kind of wild on the side of our house, and they were inside, and so the smells were absolutely beautiful. And but we were poor. We had a coal stove and barely enough money to ever buy coal. Sometimes a favorite piece of furniture was thrown into that furnace just to keep us warm. We were poor. There were only two houses on the street, and one eventually was abandoned. We had lived in that one, and then we moved to the other one, which was a nicer house, and we thought we had moved up. My cousins lived around the corner. My second cousins, actually, they were like my third cousins, but they lived around the corner from us. And there was a little alley that you could go through to get to the numbered street, which was 23rd Street. Whenever people would drop me off at my house, I would have them drop me off there, and I would go into the porch. There was an enclosed porch, and I would wait until they drove off and then come back out and run around the corner to my house. I did that for years, never letting anybody see where I actually lived. And then one day, my childhood pastor, Reverend Ross Rainey, who was a great and amazing and brilliant, thoughtful, peaceful man, he and his wife, Thelma Rainey, who became my godmother, and she was also just talented and brilliant and polite, and man, could she dress. Anyway, one day they dropped me off and said, "We know you don't live there. Where do you really live?" And I just cried and cried. I was so ashamed of where I lived. And they said, "You don't have to be embarrassed about any of that. That's silly. We just want to make sure you're home safely." And so they took me around the corner after I told them where I really lived and dropped me off. That day I was grateful that we actually had electricity and they could see the light inside. From that day on, they would drop me off at home, and I wouldn't tell anybody where I actually lived. So much so that my friend Sean said she had no idea I grew up in poverty because of the way I carried myself. And we were taught to carry ourselves in the way that we wanted people to think of us. We were readers and thinkers and listeners, but we had poverty, financial poverty. So much so that people believed whatever I projected, that I was happy, that I was joyful, that everything was okay. So I think that we hide a lot of who we are. We've hidden things that we're embarrassed about. We've hidden things that we're shameful about. So much so that we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to present ourselves authentically. We don't know how to be who we are. The other gift the Rainies gave me was to not be ashamed of who I was. That where I lived was not my doing, it was just my circumstance. And that if I put down the shame, that I could rise above it. And that one day that would be an amazing testimony that that's where I was from, but it wasn't who I or any of my siblings or my mother ever was. My mother was an amazing woman, and we just had that poverty. But it wasn't our shame. We had to rise above it. I remember years later, a boy from school who also grew up in that poverty was so ashamed of his poverty that he lied about mine. He said that I was making up this story of poverty just to seem popular in the eyes of those who like to hear the rags to riches story. Sometimes we're so ashamed of our own lives that we will lie about someone else's. But that shame is not getting us closer. It's not getting us to our truth. It's making us think that what other people's truth is not their truth because we're hiding behind our own. What if we came out from behind those things we were embarrassed about and we wore them like that's where I'm from, it's not who I am. That's what's happening to me. It's not who I am. It's just what's happening to me. Then we could walk boldly forward, strong and in our true light, because not being who you truly are takes more energy and light away from you than anything else. Be proud of who you are. And when you're proud, you can get to courage. You can get to courage. You can get to love. You can get to love. You can get to enlightenment. But as long as we walk in guilt and shame and embarrassment, we will steep ourselves in jealousy and anger and fear. And where there's lack, so much lack, and that's all we focus on, we can't see the love. We can't see that even without, we're being cared for, we're being prayed for, we're being watched over. Step out of your embarrassment and into your authenticity. I love you.